Hey, Taylor Ellwood here, and I missed you guys last week because my power was out for half the week, but I'm back, and today we're going to talk about when and if you should revise the pricing on your books. I talked about book pricing last time, and one of the suggestions I made was that you research, um, you do some research. You go onto Amazon, you go to some other book sites, and you look at how much the books in your genre are priced to get an idea as to how other people's are pricing it. Of course, that gives you an idea of how other people are pricing a book, but you always want to keep in mind that you don't necessarily want to do what those other people do. Before we get into that, if you've just started watching this video and you're not subscribed, go ahead and click the subscribe button below and click the bell notification so that way you get notified whenever I do more of these videos. So the question comes down to this: should you ever revise your book prices? Are your book prices set in stone, or should they be set in stone? Well, it depends on what you're trying to do. So for example, right here, we have my Learning How to Fly series. The Kindle ebook is $2.99 and $13.99, and then $3.99 for the sequel, and then $13.99, and it's $4.99 for the one after that, and $13.99 for the paperback. Now, as I shared before, one of the reasons why I like to do the paperback is because the paperback, for two reasons. One, if somebody wants to buy the paperback, then great, they can buy the paperback. But two, because of the pricing contrast. If I see that a book is $13.99 for paperback, but I can get it for $2.99 or $3.99 or $4.99 for my Kindle, then I'm more likely to potentially buy it for Kindle because of the fact that I can get it a bit cheaper. And I think that can be a good pricing strategy to use there. Um, I did mention that there was, I think I mentioned last time too, the example of when somebody prices their book, prices the Kindle book at a higher rate, like like $20.99 and then $22.99 for the print. And basically, if you'll recall, with Kindle, if you have your book priced at like from $2.99 to $9.99, at least for Amazon, it's 70%. And I think like on Barnes and Nobles, they've actually done something similar, and same for Kobo. And then if you have your books priced lower than that or higher than that, you get 35% royalties, which means that if you are going to price it for like if you're going to price your Kindle book, you want to really keep in mind like the percentage that you're getting, because if you, let's say you choose to price your book at like $12.99 for Kindle, that means you're getting 35% of that. Well, if you actually priced your book at say $7.99, you might actually get more of a return on each sale of that book than you would for $12.99, or $13.99, or whatever the price was that I mentioned. Now, I did mention the example of the person who priced their Kindle book. I think it was at like $20.99, and then they had $22.99 for the print book. And in that particular case, the thing that really fascinated me is that they were at $20.99 for Kindle, they were able to get a bit of a higher royalty than if they had priced it at $9.99, but it was only by like a dollar and change, which means that to make more money than you would make in that 70% range, you have to price it pretty high, which can be pretty prohibitive. I mean, I wouldn't buy a Kindle book for $20.99 for Kindle, and I don't think most people would. You have to figure that the person that if someone's going to buy that, it's going to be because that person is really well known, or because they're with a traditional publisher, and the traditional publisher is setting the prices and doesn't care. But we're all indie authors here, and we are setting our prices, and so we're always having to think, well, what's the price that people are going to pay, and what's the market going to bear? Now, in your market research, you've probably priced your book at like, if you've priced your book at like $2.99, $3.99, $4.99, you might see that that typically seems to be the price that a lot of ebooks are at. But I would argue that sometimes we end up underpricing ourselves because, as indie authors, because we see the market and we think, oh well, it's only got to be a certain, it's got to be within a certain range because people won't buy anything beyond that range. And I would say that that depends. I mean, again, it kind of depends on how well known you are. When you're first starting out, it's probably a good idea to price your books within a specific range. And in the case of my superhero books here, I've priced them very intentionally, because my superhero book, my superhero trilogy, doesn't sell that well. So I'm in the process of getting new covers, and we'll see if the new covers make a difference. But it basically it's set at $2.99, $3.99, and $4.99 in the hopes that maybe some people will buy it. And I've seen the occasional sale, but I would say that probably doesn't work, and I'm probably going to end up ultimately changing that pricing back to $4.99, because I figure, if I'm going to have somebody buy the book, I may as well at least get a little bit more out of it, than I would otherwise. So you want to think about that. Now, keep in mind that what I'm showing you here is mainly the fiction. But like if we go here to From Failure to Success, it's set to $6.99 and $16.95. Well, why is that? Well, it's a business book. And in my experience, people are willing to pay a bit more for a business book than they might be willing to pay for a non-business book. So, or not, or fiction book. So, in this case, $6.99, I've put it at that and set it at that. And I've had a few sales. I might set it to $4.99 and see if it ended up doing better, but part of that also involves deciding how much I'm going to promote the book. Now, if we go, and I'm going to go ahead and expand this, if we look at some of my occult nonfiction, what we're going to see is that with pretty much all my books, other than the magical journal books, I have them priced at a higher range. It's between $6.99 and $9.99. And in the case of the $9.99 books, it's the art books which are set at that rate again, because it's the print book costs so much more, and so it's kind of a case of setting up that price that high so that it's actually a reasonable return. Because most people are going to buy I find that a lot of people will tend to buy the ebook especially if there's a larger price. So nonetheless, when I look here, and we're just going to go down a little bit further, like I have Inner Alchemy set to $7.99 and $18.95. I have Walking with Magical Entities set to $6.99 and $18.95. And I'll probably end up increasing the prices on the Magical Entity books and like the Magic by Design and the Troubleshooting Magic books, because it's, again, a case of bringing those prices up. What I found is that, I started out initially, like with Pop Culture Magic, I started at $4.99, and, I got some decent sales from it. But what I found is that when I changed the prices, and I actually tested this a bit, I changed the prices on a few of these books where I had them set to $4.99, and I found that people were still buying them. More importantly, I found that, at least from a business perspective, this was helping me make more money than I would otherwise. So I think it's worth it to really look at how much you have your books priced, and to ask yourself, how, if your goal is to make money on your books, not only do you want to do the research in the market and see what people are charging, but you also want to ask yourself how much the market can bear. And this is where experimenting with prices can be useful, because you can set a book for a higher price and decide from there that you're going to make more money than you'll learn that you can make more money that way than you would otherwise. So I think it's sometimes worth it to consider, how much am I charging for this book, but what's the return that I'm going to get on it? And so, a $4.99 book could be a $7.99 book, and you might actually get a bit more income from it, a higher royalty, and that helps you push your books up to the next level. That was one of the things that I did last year that really helped me move my books up, as I changed the pricing to a bit of a higher price, because I was like, this is worth it. And it's something I would recommend to you, that if when you're pricing your books, don't assume that just because the market is pricing it a certain way that you couldn't make more. Part of that, again, is dependent upon how well known you are. If you're better known, and you have a following, then you can leverage that. And you should leverage it, because the fact of the matter is your authors are going to welcome that more than or your audience will understand that more than if you just keep it at a consistently low price because you're afraid that people won't buy. And I find that a lot of times, when people price their books or price any product, they price it a certain way because they're afraid, to charge more, to charge their worth. Don't get me wrong, there is value in setting up products that are reasonably priced. I have video courses that I offer both for my esoteric nonfiction and my indie author nonfiction, and I've tried to price those courses very reasonably around what the appropriate price, what I think the appropriate price should be. So, for example, if I have a book, if I have a course priced at around $40 or $50, that's pretty reasonable compared to, say, offering a course for $2.99 or $3.99. Now, some people again will get away with that, but again, part of that comes down to following. Some of it comes down to how they're choosing to do things. I personally have always found that I would rather price the course at a reasonable rate where it's not going to break the bank for the person. Because I've tried doing that $9.97 or even like $3.97 or whatever, and that's a lot of money. And you have to make sure, as the price goes up, you have to make sure that the value goes up as well, and that the value always exceeds the price. Anytime you price any product or anything along those lines, you always want to be thinking, how can I make sure that the price exceeds the value, or not the price, that the value exceeds the price? Excuse me, a little bit of verbal dyslexia there. Because the value should be more than what the price is. If I'm paying, $7.99 for a book, I want to make sure that I'm getting a ton of ideas out of that book and practices and things like that that are going to help me, if it's a nonfiction book. Or if it's a fiction book, I want to make sure it's a fiction book that I'm going to want to read again, because, that's money that I basically just invested in that. And I always think that that's kind of the same mentality that most people will bring to any product that they buy. I mean, it depends, how often will you end up really reading something. But I can tell you that my favorite books, I've read those books, at least a few times over. And the price that I paid, I've easily exceeded the value of that price, because what was in that book or what was in that class was worth it to me. Whereas I've also paid a ton for courses and gone through them and gotten some value out of them or what have you, but never gone back because it maybe didn't quite live up to the expectation. And that's where things can get really, that's where like a course can get excessive. And that's where you kind of have to be like, okay, if I haven't gotten the return on investment, why did I pay this much? These are the things that you want to be thinking about in your own pricing strategies. Like, am I giving enough value here? But also, what is it that I can do to make sure that I'm pricing accordingly in a way where I'm getting a return on investment for the product that I've created. Now, in the next video, I'm going to talk a bit about pricing in relationship to sales, and when to do sales, and if it's a good idea to do a sale on something like a book. All right, see you next time.